You're listening to The White Rabbit, conversations on the art of presenting in a rather noisy world. Your hosts are Matt Krause and Alper Rosanes. Matt helps leaders of international companies speak, write, and present with confidence. Alper is a communications trainer and a startup investor with a diverse portfolio of companies in Barcelona. If you like this podcast, please share it with friends and colleagues. Now, on to Matt and Alper for today's conversation.
Alper, today we have kind of a grab bag on the podcast. And the reason for that is that we have some miscellaneous comments that have been building up over the past few episodes. And no one comment is worthy of a full episode, but together we want to cover these comments. So does that sound okay with you?
Yeah.
Okay.
In other words, we're going to come up with a dedicated topic for this week.
There we go. There we go. That's another way of saying it. Absolutely. Okay, so I've got a couple comments, and then you have some things that you want to cover. So who should go first?
Let's start with you.
Okay, so I will go first. And both of the comments, I'll start with the first one. I have been thinking about changing something that I outlined in a previous episode, and for months have been considering gospel when I work with my clients, and those are the four things. So I have recently reevaluated the four things, and I'm considering changing them, but I'm not quite sure if I should. So I'm going to...
Let's see.
Yeah, so I'm going to briefly outline what that change would be, and then I want to hear your feedback on it. So the old version of the four things, number one is, well, first of all, the challenge that the four things are aimed at fixing or addressing are that it's kind of a core issue for a lot of my clients, which is that I have limited English, but I want to grow my sales abroad. And it would sure help me if I didn't have such limited English in order to do that. And so I've worked up these four things as kind of a shortcut for if you have limited English, do these four things and you'll get a whole lot more benefit than it won't take you nearly as long to get the benefit than if you spent a year or two learning the language. So Here are the four things. One is use a story structure. Put what you're saying into a story structure. The second one is reduce your awe count. And the third one is make mirror neurons work for you. Basically, that means practice a lot. Because if you're nervous, you're going to make your audience nervous too. So practice a lot. That's what I mean by make your mirror neurons work for you. So that's number three. And number four is use vivid vocabulary. For example, use the word explode instead of grow quickly. And so basically these four things are basically a way of taking a lot of in communications techno speak, I guess you would say, or geek speak, I guess you would say, taking a lot of the processing power and pushing it off of you and into the brain of the other person so that you don't have to do as much work. A lot of the work is being done by the brain of the other person. So the change that I've been thinking of making is taking these four things and adding something. So I would keep the four things, but I would add something. So it would become the five things. And the five things are another thing that I see often, which is if you have a presentation, like a sales presentation or a pitch presentation or something like that, making your headlines match and make sure that your presentation passes the taxi cab test. And what I mean by the taxi cab test is if the decision maker is in the back of a taxi cab going to the airport, they have 10 minutes before they get to the airport. They have to scan your presentation really fast. Their phone is ringing. They have a gazillion things to do. The taxi cab is careening around a corner. And so there's a lot of things competing for their attention. So you have to make sure that if the only thing that this decision maker has, the only thing that they have time for is looking at the headlines of your presentation, are the headlines going to make your case for you? That's what I mean. So I'm thinking of adding that to the five things. Tell me what you think about that.
I like them. I think they should be obligatory for any presentation before delivery.
Well, here's kind of a counter argument against that, because that's what got me to thinking about that was exactly the thing that you just said, was that these things should be obligatory. But then I started thinking at the client level, like, at the macro level, yeah, absolutely, those things should be obligatory, and absolutely, your presentation should pass the taxi cab test. But then I started thinking on the client level, and industry by industry, things are a little bit different. Like, for example, what I mean by that is that, for example, software engineers and people in finance need this filter, the taxi cab test. They need this really bad. Like, if you look at the headlines on a lot of presentations that are cranked out by software engineers or people in finance, they're totally dead. The headlines don't match at all. There's
Hmm.
no way that that it would pass the taxi cab test. But then some clients, like, for example, I've got some clients these days who are management consultants. And management consultants have a different way of thinking, which is kind of top down. Whereas if software engineers and finance people tend to be bottom up, management consultants tend to be top down. Here's the big picture theory, and here are the executional details that we would use to make that happen.
Hmm.
So they tend to be really good at making the headlines match already. Before I even show up, they tend to be really good at that. That tends to be a skill that they already have before I even show up on the scene. So software engineers and finance people, two sectors that I do a lot of work with, they need that skill a lot. They definitely need help with that. But the management consultants tend to have it nailed before I even show up. So does that change things? Like, in your opinion, should I keep it at four things, or should I move it up to five things?
Well, I think in the presentation world, the less is more.
Okay.
But in this regard, since we're talking about some things that you do before the delivery itself,
Yeah.
I think it would be better to keep all five
Okay.
in your
Oh,
mind and actually put them into practice.
okay. And so let's move on to the second thing, and let's switch back over to this video that you recorded recently. And I thought that part of your title was really interesting. And first of all, this is a video that you recorded. I think you recorded it in Turkish. And so if you
Yep.
are, if you don't know Turkish, I'm sorry, but you're kind of out of luck on this one. So you've got to know Turkish in order to benefit from this video. It's a great video, by the way. And the phrase, or the title phrase, that you sent to me in English, by the way, was that you were in this video, you were bashing on focus on the positive, and instead you were promoting the phrase focus on the filthy scum.
Well, that's not how it is published. That was my email to you. But in reality, the video is titled, yeah, focus on the worst case scenario instead of focusing on how successful the presentation is going to go, how sweet and fluffy and positive things are going to proceed when you're presenting. No, I would recommend that you focus on the exact opposite.
Yeah, so tell me more. What are some of the things that you say people should be focusing on?
Well, before I say what they should be focusing on, let me put into words why I think this is important. Because I mean, at the end of the day, I was talking about business presentations, especially the presentations that you make to key decision makers.
Okay.
I mean, we all know how nerve-wracking they can be.
Yeah.
So you already have enough pressure on you. You
Okay.
already have enough stress going on, or your body has released enough cortisol in
Uh-huh.
your body. So, in that regard, I have the feeling, the belief that visualizing a positive outcome can actually backfire
Mm.
because, in a sense, you're setting an unrealistic standard.
Interesting.
Like, this is how the presentation is going to go. I'm going to rock my slide. My slides are going to rock. I'm going to um, like persuade everyone in the room, if there is ever such a thing. By
Sure.
the way, we can talk about this
Uh-huh.
separately. And I feel that any deviation from that imagined perfection, let's say, can create panic on
Mm.
you during the
Interesting.
presentation. And you and I have enough miles on the stage to know that it
Yeah,
happens. I mean, something
absolutely.
goes wrong, something goes unplanned. So that's the reason. So that we would be setting an unexpected, not unexpected, unrealistic expectation if we only focus on the positive. By the way, full disclosure, I was one of those people who
Oh
advocated
yeah.
that idea until like several years ago. Yeah, close your eyes, think of yourself, you're on the stage, everybody's clapping, they're giving you a standing ovation, etc. I have been
Yeah,
guilty of
so
that.
so what
Yeah.
brought about this change? Why, if in the past you used to be, oh, close your eyes and visualize everything being perfect, and now you're like, oh, maybe not. So what caused that change?
Well, well, because every single time I walk up to the stage imagining those positive things, something went
Uh-huh.
wrong, and I had to deal with something that I
Uh,
wasn't prepared for. So that's why I'm like 180 degrees
uh,
opposite on this. And I think there are several reasons why this approach works better than the other one. And I think it would be the first one would be actually reducing the pressure on you, because when you do imagine
uh,
the worst case scenario and survive it, of course, in your mind before the presentation, for sure the real thing is going to feel
ah,
less daunting. And if something goes wrong, you will realize that, hey, the world didn't come to an end. People are not gifting me
yeah,
with rotten
yeah,
eggs or tomatoes just because I fumbled a slide or
uh,
something else. So I think it's actually is more stress and pressure reducing on your body to focus on the failure, let's say, or the
yeah,
negative outcome, rather than focusing on the success, or investing or tying your, let's say, your
ah,
success to a stellar and perfect presentation.
interesting. So this I don't know what to call it. This idea that you should be psyching yourself up for and preparing for perfection. You're saying that that might actually be setting you up for getting frazzled if something,
Yes.
if, and not just if, but probably when something goes wrong in your presentation.
Yes, and we all have been through that. So, I mean,
Yeah.
you stumble taking the stage because they're usually higher, and I have flown
Uh,
several times myself onto
yeah.
the stage. Like,
Wait, back up a second. Are you serious? Like you actually, because that is my worst nightmare. You're walking
yes,
up on the trip and you have actually tripped. Is that what you're saying?
yes, of course,
Really?
yes.
Wow.
I mean, I was able to recover, but that wasn't very elegant.
Yeah, when that happens, how do you pull something like that off? Do you say something or what do you do?
It happened to me twice actually over the course of maybe 10, 15 years. And the first one, I felt blood rushing through my face out of being so ashamed. But the
uh,
second one was maybe years apart or maybe a decade apart, and I just laughed through it. And I think I made a joke about it. But yeah, it's still unwelcome. It's still unexpected.
what you're talking about kind of reminds me of what one of our guests said on this podcast just a couple weeks back. Remember when we had Brad Ferris on the
Hmm.
podcast?
Yeah.
One of the things we talked about was because we were talking about this disaster that I had in Romania, and he was stressing that no one's going to die if something goes
Hmm.
bad. No one's going to die. It's not like the stakes are really that high. You might, or they're not as high as you might imagine they are.
We'd
Kind
like
of
to
like that,
think they are, but they're actually not.
huh? Yeah, no one's going to die. All right, so um,
There's actually one more reason why I like this approach,
uh
because I think focusing on the negative, focusing on the failure, it actually at the same time forces you
uh
to consider and focus more on the basics of your presentation. And when I say the basics, I'm talking about your core message,
ah
the main point or the main points that you will need to deliver.
uh
Because when you visualize, let's say, a disaster happening during your presentation,
yeah
you will be forced to think about, okay, if everything crashes through the wall,
uh
what are the main things that the audience should still remember, even my presentation turned out into a disaster? But if it
uh
does, and if you still have your main points rock solid in your mind, even if you have like several minutes left after disaster striking, you still can say, okay, I mean, imagine yourself saying something like, okay, that was a disaster and I'm sorry, I apologize. So see you next time. Versus,
ooh
okay, that didn't go as
yeah
planned. But before I and I would like to wrap up the main points
oh
in this
yeah
presentations. And they were point one, point two, point three, etc., etc. You still leave the stage with some dignity, if not a lot more than you would have if you said, okay, that was a disaster. I forgot my points. So I'm just going to stop here and, wish you the
Yeah,
best.
and so before we wrap up, and I don't want to beat this, how would you say it, beat this dead horse any more than it needs to be. So, but this, what you're describing reminds me of a phrase that I like. And I want to keep this podcast clean. I don't want to get an explicit warning. So, but the phrase is embrace the blah, blah, blah. I guess in diplomatic phrasing, you would say embrace the bad times. So,
That's a way watered down version of it, I
embrace the
believe.
bad times. If you do this, then when something goes wrong in your presentation or something unexpected happens in your presentation, you're going to be more flexible in moving with it rather than getting all flustered and making a fool of yourself up on stage. You're going to be, oh, go ahead.
And
You're going to be,
go
yeah,
ahead.
you're not going to get flustered. You're going to seem much more natural up there when it goes wrong.
Yeah. One more thing to keep in mind, maybe, Matt, is like I never, and I bet you never have ever rooted for a presenter to
correct.
fail on stage. And I don't think any audience member has ever taken his or her seat thinking that, okay, now I want to watch this guy,
Yeah, I've never.
flounder so bad. That's not the thing. They're there
Yeah.
actually to learn from you, not judge your every word. So, I mean, maybe I would be the last person to say this because I have suffered from this for years, but just take a deep breath and enjoy the ride of being the presenter at the time. And if at that moment, if something goes south,
Good point.
okay, just deal with it on the stage and keep
Excellent.
talking.
So to wrap up the episode, so let's see. I've covered the main reevaluation that I'm making. And by the way, I wanted to mention, just because Matt is, reevaluating his core principles doesn't mean that he's going to go easy on you. If you're one of my current clients, I just want to put this warning out there. So just because Matt is, reevaluating his choices in life, doesn't mean that he's going to go easy on you. So you don't get to slack off. So don't think this is a green light to slack off. So, okay, so I've got to clear up one thing, and then you mentioned this video that you sent out the other day, which I thought was a great video. So before we go, is there anything else that you'd like to cover for this episode?
No, I'm sure we'll have more on the upcoming episodes, but I think for today, we're okay.
Excellent. All right, well, it's been a real pleasure, and I will see you next week then.
Likewise. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to The White Rabbit with Matt Krause and Alper Rosanes. You can subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or through your favorite feed.